What do Patek Philippe, Audemars Piguet and Vacheron Constantin all have in common? Yes, they do make up the top 3 best watchmakers in the world, but there's something else they share. They have all source movements from Jaeger-LeCoultre. Originating as an amalgam of car instrument manufacturer Jaeger and Paris-based watchmaker LeCoultre, Jaeger-LeCoultre's list of accolades includes the invention of over 1,200 different calibers and 400 patents. With the world's smallest movement, the near-perpetual clock, and even the invention of the first instrument to measure a micron to the watchmaker's name, it's no wonder the top manufacturers come to Jaeger-LeCoultre for expertise. And here's yet another reason: the limited edition Duomètre unique travel time. Watches with the capability of displaying multiple time zones have existed since the 18th century, helping travellers cope with changing times across states and countries. All very well and good, but these watches were simple, with one dial for home and one for local, and required the user to know the time difference in order to set them. A solution came about in the 1930s thanks to a watchmaker called Louis Cotier. He developed a world timer mechanism that ringed the dial with 24 cities, one for each hour of the day, which could each be selected to adjust the time shown on the main display. This meant the user was not required to know which time zone they needed, merely selecting the city itself and letting the watch do the rest. Cotier's movement was so good that it eventually found its way into the Patek Philippe and Vacheron Constantin world timers of the time. This particular solution brought about problems of its own, however. The first was the requirement to know the time differences of cities not highlighted on the dial. New York was demarcated as the city for GMT minus 5 hours, for example, but what about Miami or Washington, D.C.? The second problem is that, while 24 time zones is a lot of time zones, they're not all the time zones. There are in fact 38 in total, including Indian Standard Time, which is offset by 5.5 hours from GMT. Not possible on a standard world timer. And it gets even more complicated. In India, Bombay time is GMT plus 4 hours and 51 minutes, Calcutta plus 5 hours and 54 minutes. So, what's the solution? Enter the Jaeger-LeCoultre unique travel time. And it certainly is unique. You get 2 time displays, home on the right and local on the left, which, by the way, uses a jumping hour display for quick reading. But you don't have to memorise anything. It probably hasn't gone unnoticed that there's a great big globe at the bottom of the dial too, complete with spherical relief. And this is the source of this travel timer's cleverness. You see, there's no need to remember which city has what time zone here. All you need to do is go forwards or backwards, whichever's quickest, with the pushers, and align the relevant city with the red arrow at the bottom. If we start at GMT, for example, and want to set the local display to Miami time, we click the globe around until the red arrow points at Miami. And that's it. Done. You even get a handy shaded day-night indicator on the GMT ring that shows you which half of the globe is in darkness, which somehow floats and moves independently when setting. And if there are any doubts about which time zone you're looking for, there's a handy city list on the back, same as you'd get on the dial of a traditional world timer. But what about the countries with non-integer time zones, like India? Simple. Pull out the crown one click and adjust local time however you like. While this does require a knowledge of the local time difference, it's unparalleled by other world timers. It's so flexible, you can even set it to 0 and use it as a timer if you really want to. And the downsides? Well, while I've been talking, you may have spotted that the globe only shows the northern hemisphere. For the southern hemisphere, Sydney for example, you'll need to refer to the list on the caseback to find the time difference, or use the internet. Maybe Jaeger-LeCoultre could look into having the southern hemisphere appear through the caseback or something. But back to the positive. The last feature of the dial is the power reserve indicator. You'll notice there are 2. Why? Because the caliber 383 that powers this watch is a 498-part monster with some particularly trick features. The movement is based on the dual wing concept Jaeger-LeCoultre introduced to increase accuracy. As the functionality of this watch is power hungry, more torque is needed to achieve the 50 hours of reserve Jaeger-LeCoultre wanted, But simply adding a larger mainspring is not necessarily the answer, as torque decreases over time as a mainspring unwinds, a phenomenon that becomes more apparent as the mainspring gets larger. The solution is unique and beautifully simple. The home time and local time displays each have their own mainspring, and thus their own power reserve displays. On a roll with clever, simple ideas, Jaeger-LeCoultre also figured that they could have the crown turn one way to wind one mainspring, and back again to wind the other. Genius. The cherry on the cake, and a continuation of the accuracy theme, is the caliber 383's ability to stop and reset the central seconds hand when the crown is pulled, for precision setting. Jaeger-LeCoultre didn't need to add that feature, but they did. Of course they did. It's no wonder that the world's best watchmakers turn to Jaeger-LeCoultre for expertise. This is a hugely complicated movement that packs in the features, and yet it still fits into a 42mm case that stays on the sensible side of thick. And not only is it functional, but beautiful too, especially this limited edition with its hand-engraved Échoppe dial. Patek Philippe, Audemars Piguet and Vacheron Constantin may get all the glory, but it's watches like this from Jaeger-LeCoultre that truly deserve it. Discover more exceptional watches at watchfinder.co.uk. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. If there are any other watches you'd like to see reviewed, please let us know in the comments below.